All right, it was about time, we've been handling the classic Aliens comics. It's about time we jumped into the classic Predator comics with this first original year's omnibus. And where do we start? Why, with Predator Concrete Jungle. Concrete Jungle, there are three different Concrete Jungle stories. Well, two of them are very similar. We got the comic Concrete Jungle, its novelization, which has some changes, and we have Concrete Jungle, the video game, which has nothing to do with the original Concrete Jungle story. Now, this was written by Mark Vierden, who wrote like everything at Dark Horse, I guess, at this point. It was penciled by Chris Warner and Ron Randall, inked by Sam De La Rosa and Randy Emberlin, Chris Warner, and Ron Randall. Colors by Chris Chalner, lettered by J. David Jackson and Jim Massara. And of course, edited by Randy Stradley, because Randy Stradley is like the editor for Dark Horse. I mean, his name's on some of the greatest comic books ever written, quite frankly. So, what's this about? In the summer of 1989, Detective Schaefer and Detective Rash stumble across a drug deal gone wrong, but something's amiss. Everyone's butchered and skinned alive. Well, there's a new player in town, and it's a Yautja. Or is it just one? And of course, the military is involved. See, here's the thing with Concrete Jungle. This is kind of based off a sequel that was going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Hence why there's a Schaefer in this. Now, it was supposed to be Dutch Schaefer. Instead, it's his brother in this, because the 20th Century Fox said no. I think they were still trying to work out getting Arnold back for the sequel. It was going to be a buddy cop thing with Yautja, which that turned into Predator 2. But in between that, we got Concrete Jungle, which is a wild comic. The only movie character to return is the Major, who was in the original Predator that sends Dutch's team off on the mission, basically to die. So it's interesting to have him back. And this is the beginning of the whole government is following the Yautja. But in this, they really don't know what to do with them, because they're pretty new to this discovery of extraterrestrial life, let alone extraterrestrial life that goes and hunts human beings. They are not equipped to deal with the problem. And as the heat grows in New York City, so does the heat of conflict, and thus the Yautja are attracted to it. But I want to talk about how this is written. So this is written from Detective Rash's perspective for the first few issues. Then it switches to Schaefer's perspective on things when Schaefer goes off and does his own thing while Rash stays in New York, which is where the comic kind of doesn't quite work for me. It's a weird digression. So early on, Schaefer gets this weird thing implanted in his neck from the Yautja, and the Yautja are able to track him. And that's weird. The way the Yautja act in this is kind of different to how they act now, because there wasn't anything written for the Yautja. So I gotta explain the Predator novelization. That was not a Yautja. That was a different thing that was a shapeshifter and all sorts of weird things. So unlike with the Aliens comics, where you had 2 movies and 2 novelizations and a Heavy Metal magazine story to kind of go off of, this, they didn't have anything. So it's kind of awesome how well this does, but there are some funky things with it. Funky things that, honestly, I think the Predator took from, which you can think all sorts of things on that. I won't say what they took, but they took an aspect that really isn't a factor in anything else Predator that isn't written by Mark Veerden. Because Mark Veerden has a few Predator stories. Like with his Alien stories where they kind of all connect. His Predator stories, they didn't come out simultaneously. They came out over a period of years. For instance, the sequel Cold War was not the next comic series to have the Yautja in it. There's actually another one in between. You wouldn't know that from the novels, though. But I'll get to that at another time. So this comic, it reads like a police noir thing. And there's a lot of police monologuing. And it's kind of fun. The art in this is pretty great. It's pretty gruesome, nasty. Feels very 90s, but in a good way. Like late 80s, early 90s comics. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of the Nightfall arc. That Batman comic. The art it just reminds me of that. I think this is a little better than that. But it feels classic Dark Horse. Not super weird, but like pretty darn good. Would I recommend Concrete Jungle? Would recommend Predator Concrete Jungle. And here are a few versions of it I have, which are virtually the same. We got, of course, the Marvel Omnibus that was released, I think, a couple years ago now, but you can still find it. Also, I have the Predator 30th Anniversary hardcover. This has Concrete Jungle plus Cold War and Dark River. So that, if you want the complete, what's called the Schaefer trilogy, this is where you go. I think Dark River's in this. I'm not 100% sure. Yes, it is. You can get that in here, but this is in publication order, so you're not going to read them back to back to back unless you want to flip around through the book. But this has all sorts of goodies in here that are well worth your time to check out. But yeah. What would I rate Concrete Jungle? I give it a 4.3 out of 5. It's quite good, but in my opinion, it's not... It's its own thing. I wouldn't call this a typical Predator-type story. It's kind of grandiose in the sake of, like, something like the Alien stuff Mark Veerden wrote during this time. It's well worth your time to check out, though. I highly recommend. So, anyway, have a good one.